Okay, so if you're using Linux in your PC, you already probably know this news. NVIDIA has decided to go ahead and then completely open source its drivers. It's probably like the biggest news in a decade or so, because NVIDIA has always been a problem for Linux, considering the sweetest words spoken by Linus Torvalds in a conference, I guess.
So NVIDIA, fuck you.
It has technically not yet open sourced the drivers yet, and there are good and bad aspects of this, to be honest. The good aspects of this is that now that NVIDIA is completely open source, you don't have the hassle of installing all the stuff manually and then having all the bugs which NVIDIA proprietary had, which means the company has the complete control over the drivers. With that said, now that the drivers are completely open source, you can go ahead and then have a merge request, and NVIDIA would probably accept it if it is helpful to the company itself. So with that said, there are a lot more good aspects of, just like AMD, you also will probably get a very hassle-free experience through NVIDIA, because now that NVIDIA is open source, the distributions can consider directly implementing it into the package system and into the Linux distro itself by default and so on. Now, don't get me wrong, NVIDIA already had its own open source versions before, and the open source version of NVIDIA drivers were called Novu. You kind of get my point. It's filled with bugs. Although it's open source, it's not helpful at all, and that's the reason most people just prefer going with the proprietary drivers instead of the open source Novu drivers. It will also open a huge gate of people who are using Windows just because they are using NVIDIA. Now that NVIDIA is open source, people can now just jump from Windows to Linux no matter what graphic drivers they are using. And I mean all the graphic drivers, including NVIDIA, AMD and Intel. All the three graphic drivers are pretty much supported in Linux equally right now. Now again, NVIDIA has not yet completely open sourced it yet, although the final decision has been made, and yeah, it's gonna be open source in no time. Now that is where the good part ends. So the bad part is where the support comes in. You see, now that NVIDIA is completely open source, it still has to take a lot of time. It's probably going to take a lot of time to settle down as an open source graphic driver, because not only does it have to go ahead and then pick up with the AMD graphic drivers, it also has to pick up and then gain the support in the Linux community itself, which is kind of difficult now that NVIDIA has this very bad reputation. And it will probably take a lot of time just to pick up and then be in level with AMD, and then give a fairly good competition with AMD, because now that NVIDIA is very recently open sourced, it still needs some time to go ahead and then settle down as an open source driver. Now we might probably see a drastic decrease in the number of users using distributions like Pop! OS, because now that NVIDIA is completely open source, people are gonna go ahead and then switch their distributions. I mean, you have to consider that there are a lot of people using Pop! OS just because they use NVIDIA drivers. And now that NVIDIA drivers are completely open source, people can use whatever they want now, and Pop! OS will probably see a decrease in users. I mean, it's not going to be a sudden drop or something like that, but it is going to probably cause a drastic decrease in the long term, considering that graphic drivers was a very major selling point for Pop! OS. And of course, I'm not talking about just Pop! OS, I include all the other ones as well. And finally, I just want to appreciate NVIDIA for open sourcing their drivers. And yeah, that's about it in this video. I hope you guys got something from this. Go ahead, hit a like so that YouTube knows you're enjoying what you're watching, and of course go ahead, subscribe, and there are a lot more videos coming soon. And with that said, I'm gonna meet you in the next video.